Come on now. There we go. Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Hotspot podcast. Going to get this thing tweeted out here, and then we will record there and there and record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, December the 5th, 9:15 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, joined as always by Scott Docterman from The Athletic. Busy week for Scott. He's got a lot going on. He's heading down to Indy tomorrow to watch the Big Ten championship games. I saw some think pieces this week, Scott, on pining and the loss of the Big Ten West and keep divisions and conferences. No, man. No, you look at the championship games this year. This is what you want. You can make a case that the schedules are in balance. Penn State didn't have to play Oregon during the regular season, but Ohio State cost themselves with a bad loss against Michigan. So they've got nobody to blame but themselves. And Indiana didn't have the schedule to get into there, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow night or Saturday night a lot. I'm more intrigued than I was when Iowa was in it against Michigan, Scott. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, other than it being a game involving a team that we cover on a day-to-day basis, there was really nothing compelling, especially about last year.
Yeah.
Because I think last year we all knew what was going to happen. I mean, Michigan was the best team in the country and Iowa was not. So when you look at, this year, I just went through like 25 different statistical categories just to see how do they measure up and everything. It's almost identical. I mean, scoring offense, Oregon's at 35, Penn State's 33. Scoring defense, Penn State gives up 14, Oregon gives up 16. And it's like that just throughout. The only one where it's just a little bit off is punting. So if punting is winning, Oregon's going to win that. They're third and Penn State's 18th. So, but that's the only one where there's any kind of a major separation between them. And this again, as you said, this is what you want in a championship game, which is two teams of equal ability, because it was, morganatic, kind of like in the old European royalty where you had a king or a prince that married somebody well beneath them and they couldn't even, be buried in the same spot and stuff like that. It was kind of that way with the West and the East towards the end. It was, early on, first 4 or 5 years, it was pretty even. Wisconsin had some good teams, Iowa, of course, in 15, but last 3, 4 years, it really got skewed. And I would say that now it's pretty even. You look across the way, as you said, at the other major conferences, they're, Iowa State and Arizona State, same conference record. They got in, there were 4 teams with the same conference record, but they won the tiebreakers. SEC, Georgia, Texas, nothing wrong there. ACC, that one was a little bit strange with Miami losing out, but Clemson had a better record, conference record. So, and they had a chance, and that's why they fell out of the playoff bracket. So, I think overall it's accomplished its mission. I think the one question is, as the playoff probably expands in the future, how important are these going to be, and are they going to be a detriment to both teams who have to play an extra game? Whereas you look at Ohio State, they're pissed off they're not in this game, but if they would have lost this game, they'd be in the exact same position that they are by not playing in it, except they have a week off, that may help them get a little bit healthier. So I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. I'll be interested to watch how that all plays out.
Yeah, Sunday will be interesting based on the championship games. And it was pretty calm, I would say, overall during the CFP weekly releases until this week. Then poo-poo started to hit the fan a little bit, and there was complaints. I saw Pollard going, what was that, the SMU? AT, they were going at it on social media. So we'll see. It could get ugly on Sunday because, as we said, when there was a 14 playoff, 5 and 6, 7 maybe had a beef. Now you're going to have a bunch of teams behind 12 that feel like they have a beef, even more teams. And that's going to, I mean, it is, there's no such thing as bad publicity. I think they may test that on Sunday because there are going to be people that are mad and they're going to go on TV and they're going to complain and all that other stuff.
It's for sure. But I think it's also added to the intrigue.
Yo,
I mean,
yeah,
we're talking
definitely.
about more teams that
Yep.
have more legitimate gripes or arguments in their behalf and things they can use. I mean, when you're talking about 3-loss teams in this SEC that have an opportunity, I mean, we'd be sitting here right now, Rob, no Ohio State, probably no Georgia because they have 2 losses.
Hmm.
You would look at Indiana with 1 loss, probably not getting in the playoff, 14 playoff, no, definitely not. But now we've got teams that are complaining about being left out. And I think the interesting thing with Jamie Pollard more than anybody else is the Big 12 feels awfully slighted here. And part of it is not just that that they're only going to get one team in the playoff, their champion. It's because they're behind Boise State, and they can't believe that. And so they're really upset that they feel like their team, their champion has played a more complete schedule, which is absolutely true. But Boise State has lost only 1 game, and that was to Oregon in the final seconds. And it's kind of skated through. They beat a 2-9 or 2-8 Wyoming by like 3 points, and had some wins like that. They do have one of the most exciting players in the country, but that's what I think is going to make this fun, because before we were arguing, whether or not the SEC should get 2 teams in or the Big Ten should get 2 teams in or whatever. And now we're talking about 12, and then in the front side and then back, you can have 14 or 16 in a couple of years, and that's going to make it even more compelling. But like Ole Miss complaining, you lost to a 4-8 Kentucky. Okay, you had your chance, but they also make an interesting case. So, I guess right now the good thing is for Iowa fans, if you would have won the Michigan State UCLA games like you should have, you would have been a very frustrated 10-2. You would have probably been about 15th or 16th. And that would have been really hard to take. That how can these SEC teams with 3 losses be ranked ahead of you? I'll tell you why, because they're better.
Yeah.
But you don't want to hear that when you're 10-2 and they're 9-3.
And you always have the gambling angle when people are like, okay, if Boise State were to play Iowa State on a neutral field, who would be favored? It would be Iowa State, probably.
Yeah.
So, but you can't pick teams like that.
Right. The SEC would win all of those.
Yeah.
Because they're, they recruit, and, whatever, 70 or 65 of their players are 4 stars. And, and then you look talent person for person and player for player. Their talent is way better than everybody else's. But then you look at, it's like with Iowa, every year they would fail that test because you look at them, they're 3-star guys, blah, blah, blah. But then the way they win, like they did the other night, it's not the prettiest way at all, but you got over the finish line. So that's so style points are and projection are difficult in that type of comparison.
Let's use that as our entry point into the Iowa football discussion. Dramatic win, last second field goal by Drew Stevens. It's crazy how many times Iowa has beaten Nebraska in just a gut punch, kick in the nuts kind of way. It just adds to the misery for the Huskers, but they will go to a bowl game. So will Iowa. Just I guess overall for this regular season, Scott, we talked about before we started recording. First of all, it was very bizarre, strange, just weird stuff happening from on the field to off the field to mixed messages to conflicting reports to all of that stuff. But I think in the end, this was a team we thought could compete for a playoff spot, and it finished 8-4. And we can talk about injuries and things that didn't work out, but I wonder how this season will be remembered. And again, it's up to the individual, right? It's whatever lens you're looking through. What were your expectations this year? For me, it was a disappointing season. And I look at the losses at Michigan State and UCLA. I think Iowa is better than those two teams, and they lost.
Yeah. I'm there with you. I think this was a good season, not a great season. It was a B minus C plus season. They had the potential to win more, and they didn't. They also had the potential to lose more games, and they didn't. They did in the last 2 weeks in particular. They conquered some adversity. They circled the wagons, and nobody does it better than Iowa, and they're able to put that out and win those games. They had some incredible wins at home. I mean, you
Yeah.
think about scored 40 on Wisconsin and Washington and Northwestern. Those are big, but you kind of judge these teams in these seasons on what were your initial projections and what you thought they could do in the high end, and then if they don't reach them, then they tend to fall off. I think in looking at it in totality, in retrospect, it's not surprising that they're 8-4 to be that inconsistent, to have the 131st passing game in the country. You're not going to win 10 games, every year with that. I mean, last year was an aberration because they were 130th and there were only 133 teams. This year there's 134, so they finished ahead of only the service academies for the second straight year. Different reasons, but kind of the same. Quarterback gets hurt, your starter. Quarterback didn't play that well before he got hurt. You bring in a guy, Brendan Sullivan was a blip. He was only his 2-game starter, played, better part of 3 games. And then you used a walk on and then you used last year, a guy probably was like a walk on, but didn't play as well as this one did. And this one didn't play that well. He just didn't make any mistakes, which is huge. So, overall, this was an 8-4 team. It's because quarterback wasn't as good, and the quarterback wasn't good at all. Defense wasn't as good as we expected. I think that's probably the two things that stand out for me. However, on the flip side, Rob, the run game was outstanding this year, and they had one of the best players in the country. That for the first week of the season when he wasn't going to start, and then of course he sat out the first game, part of it. I didn't know if he was going to be any good at all or even on the team.
Yeah, great story. Caleb Johnson announced this week that he will forego the bowl game and head to the NFL. Not a surprise. I saw Dane from The Athletic had 25th, I think, in the first round to the Chargers. Good spot for him.
Yeah.
Harbaugh.
Yeah, Harbaugh.
Loves to run the ball.
Yeah.
He'd love him. So, yeah, best of luck to Caleb. What a great story he was. And he really made the season super enjoyable. Otherwise, it would have been like last year because you still had a bad offense. It would have been the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that, the offensive line, I think, met what we hoped, met that. All right, are they going to mature? Are the sand kicked in their face these years? Are they going to kick back? And they did. It was a good season for the offensive line and the running game. Again, like you said, the defense fell off some, but still was a really good defense. It's just this program is not going to reach its potential until they figure out the quarterback position. And yesterday at the signing day press conference, Kirk Ferentz addressed going into the portal, and I think he said they'd be crazy or dumb not to go into the portal and look for a quarterback. I think they have to. I don't think it's just searching around and maybe we'll hit on something. I think they have to find a quarterback in the portal, and we'll see what happens here. I don't know what their evaluation is of Jackson Stratton and Brendan Sullivan for next year, where they feel, what they feel those guys can be next year, but you got to have somebody, you got to bring somebody in that can compete for the starting job in my mind. And I don't think that's breaking news.
What I gathered out of it, I wrote a column about it today that, when Kirk says we'd be fools not to investigate.
I forgot the language.
Yeah, I know, but it's the same thing. It's all the same meaning. And both he and Tyler Barnes, and then I had a side thing with Tyler Barnes. It's obvious. They're going in for a starter. They're not going in for, they may say, we're going to compete, give those guys a chance, blah, blah, blah. But let's face it, they're going in to get a starting quarterback. They need one. no offense to Brendan Sullivan, he was kind of a breath of fresh air because he did something different than we hadn't seen for a while. But you've got to pass to be able to win in the Big Ten. You can't just run the ball unless you're like an Army, and that's still not going to win championships. So they need to go get somebody, and they are right now linked to some guys in the portal already. And it's true they are going to go after a good quarterback, and whether it's Miller Moss or Connor Weigman, from Texas A&M, or somebody else that Kirk said it doesn't have to be an FBS guy. You look at Minnesota with Max Brosmer. He played really well for the last couple of months of the season. He would be as good as somebody since maybe Stanley or Beathard for Iowa. If he
Iowa
was,
would probably be 10-2 if they had him, at
yeah,
least.
10-2, maybe 11-1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they win that Iowa State game.
Yeah, because their quarterback was 5 of 18 in the final 3 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
There's some plays to be made there. So if they're 11-1, wow. First of all, talk about the conundrum that the committee would have then, because they wouldn't have played Oregon, Indiana, or Penn State. Their loss would have been equal to what Indiana. That would have been their season. It would have been Iowa or Indiana. And I don't think they get 5 Big Ten teams in, but so maybe it's for the best overall, I suppose. But yeah, this year coming up, you just need it. This is different. In the old Big Ten West, Rob, it was a line of scrimmage league where everybody kind of knew what everybody did, and you had to play a certain way, and it was very risk averse and physical. And you look at the 2 teams, Iowa and Wisconsin, kind of dictated the tempo of the West, and Illinois and Minnesota followed in that style. Northwestern could play to that style. Nebraska never adapted anything right. And then Purdue decided to zag, and it worked for them. But, you look at the final records, and, they made it to the championship with an 8-win season, because everybody else wasn't very good. So, you can't do that anymore, because now you are playing everybody frequently, not just Illinois every year or whatever, Northwestern every year. So quarterback's it. They got to go get him. They got to go get number 1. They seem to like the new guy coming in, the new Sully, Jimmy Sullivan, who's going to be one of 7 guys to enroll early. And and then another thing that's interesting is Tim Lester won't be on the road. He's going to stay back and try to work with the quarterback. I don't know how much or they can work in the off season. I have to really look at those rules, but he's going to be all in on tweaking the offense for these players and making sure that they work the right way. And Tyler Barnes will take his place on the road, because now you can do that, and have other staffers be designated as recruiters. So that's probably a win-win. You think about it, because Tyler, being the general manager now, knows what he's looking for. And then with Tim, he can really concentrate, because I think he did a lot of really good things, honestly. And I think the passing game looked better. It wasn't executed better. That was probably the problem.
Yeah, and he's not hunting like back in December of whatever year that was, when O'Keefe was on the road and he looked at Zach Wilson and Spencer Petras, and he's not identifying high school guys now. He's identifying portal guys. Plenty of film he can watch. He can evaluate those guys on film. He doesn't need to go out and watch them throw as you do with a high school quarterback. He'll do that in May when they're looking ahead. They already have a 26 quarterback, so no rush there. For me, Scott, the question I would have is, as Kirk said, it doesn't have to be an FBS guy, and I think you should be involved with guys like Miller Moss. Get involved, but don't put all your eggs in the basket of those name guys. Identify a guy who fits your system, no matter where he is, and get him. It can't be, I'm just going to take the junior college kid because he fits up. But there are a lot of good guys out there, a lot of good quarterbacks out there. It doesn't have to be a name brand. And I think they need to cast a wide net and make sure they get somebody. You don't want to get left because you missed on Miller Moss, then you miss on this guy, then you miss on this guy, and then you're left with scraps. You don't want to go there. So be realistic when you're in the portal for Iowa. You're trying to sell somebody, hey, come Come to Iowa. We have the 131st ranked passing offense. Come on, come to Iowa. It's not an easy sell. So it's harder than just going, okay, we're going to throw a bunch of money at a guy and see if he comes here. You really have to do work and get the right guy.
Yeah, you do. You've got to make sure that your pitch is right. And this is one of the good things, Rob, about having early signing day. That
Yeah.
now all the coaches are at home. So when it all opens up at the portal and people start visiting then your coaches are there. You're not like, oh, Tim's over in Chicago or he's in Texas evaluating this. He can come back, no, he's just down the hall and he can kind of talk to this person. And they have something better to sell now than they did a year ago. I mean, well, certainly 2 years ago with Brian and stuff. I mean, now they have an opportunity to say, this is what we're trying to do. This is what didn't happen this year. And you do look at our numbers, and we went from 15.4 points per game to 28 points per game. And that's what happens with our run offense. But we wanted to do this too, and we couldn't do this. And why? The trigger man wasn't good enough. We had injuries, whatever. We think you're good enough. And we think you can elevate this offense. We're not that far removed. They are, but we're not that far removed from a good quarterback. I mean, when you look at, here's a wild ass statistic, Rob. The last 5 years, Iowa's quarterbacks have combined for 46 touchdown passes, 41 interceptions. In the red zone alone, Nate Stanley threw 45 touchdowns and 1 interception. Red zone alone, he threw 68 touchdowns across the board. That's what they can say is, look, and our offense has changed. It's more quarterback friendly. We want people who can move. That's something that they were very apparent with yesterday, both Tyler and Kirk, that they figure it's time, and that's a Tim Lester part of it. So they don't want statues anymore. That's a good thing. I think the fans should celebrate that. So I do. But you're exactly right that you've got to be realistic too, because whether it's you don't want to pay that much or other people are like, yeah, but I'd rather go throw for Jeff Brom, who's going to throw it 50 times a game, than for you, who's going to throw it 30 and whatever. Okay, cool. But then you look also at a guy like what Indiana did this year with Curtis Rourke. He was at Ohio. He was a good quarterback there. He got hurt. They brought him over, and voila. You're talking about magic. And he elevated himself to being a legitimate pro candidate. So they're out there. Max Brosmer is another great example. Very, very good quarterback in New Hampshire all those years. It's funny. It was funny to listen to or interesting to listen to some of the things. Like they would start throughout the month of November, their staff started identifying players, not that they are in the portal or anything, but just watching it. Like who has eligibility, who has, FCS, whatever. And then also other quarterbacks too. Like, okay, that guy's a junior at whatever. He looks pretty good. Let's mark him down. I don't like him. Okay, let's not worry about him. And that's just in case. Now they don't do that with everybody because some departments will look at every single player in case they have the portal. Iowa doesn't do that, but they do start to examine places and people very quickly.
And that's smart. I mean, that's smart to prepare yourself what could happen and have a long list of guys rather than a few guys, and do your homework and get some background on those guys. What's the situation? Because, we know Iowa because it's our beat. Well, not our beat anymore, but we cover Iowa. So we know kind of the ins and outs, kind of all the the little nuanced stuff, and going in and researching these guys, you can kind of find something. Would this guy get beat out because he got an injury, like you said? I mean, what's the history there? So that's important. What lessons can they learn from the Cade McNamara story in this journey to get another quarterback? Because I'm not sure they handled that the best way, Scott. Just giving him the keys to the car. Maybe the first year that was okay. I'm not sure it was okay this last year to just say he's our guy. And it backfired for many reasons. And I don't know how far down this road we want to go. But it didn't work out. It was a disappointment. however you want to frame it, whatever factors you want to cite as the reasons why, it was a 2-year disappointment. And it put this program back a little bit now as it's trying to fix this position. It's worse than it was when Cade got here. So, lesson learned there. What can you do now in the portal to make sure that doesn't happen again? Because, shit, if you're talking about the court of public opinion, man, Cade McNamara and Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz approval rating in December of 2022 was really high.
Mhm.
So it's more than just bells and whistles. You got to get the right guy here and not just a name brand, is what I'm saying. And maybe it is a name brand and he works out okay. Um, but the Cade experiment did not work for whatever reason. And he is, for a lot of reasons, I should say, and he is now in the portal, Scott. And you and Chad Leistico were kind of involved in this the last few weeks with this drama, but I think it's good for everybody that this is now over.
Yeah, he's in the portal. He's going to seek another year of eligibility, and the NCAA has been a little more liberal since COVID, really about allowing guys to get extra eligibility. And I'm sure, based on his injuries and last year, for instance, he got hurt in the first quarter of his fifth game. Is that something that they take into consideration? Or this year with concussions? I mean, I'm sure they're probably in the back of their minds thinking, yeah, just get on to life's work. The last thing they want to do, though, is end up in a lawsuit. Cade McNamara sues the NCAA for another year of eligibility. That's why they're just saying, okay, fine, whatever, because they lose them all, and it's not worth their time. It's kind of like if you sue the airlines for something. I know some experience with this, and it's like you get close to a court date and they realize, what, flying in an attorney to argue their case over a couple $1,000s is not worth it. And so, you settle, or in this case, you just say, fine, go here's your waiver. Don't do it again, please. But in the lessons on this, this one is difficult because Cade checked about every box that Kirk was looking for. He played against him. He saw him. He actually had a good game that day. Eric All caught a touchdown pass, so he had a good game too. He was a part of a championship team. He, was a captain. He seemed like a good leader. His opportunity wasn't that he sucked. He got hurt. And then, oh, by the way, they had another quarterback who's more talented than he was, and it just wasn't going to work out. Hey, okay, come to another Big Ten school, do everything you ask him to do. He seemed to fit that part. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. And last year, about this time, it got more difficult for them because he thought he deserved a little more than what he was getting. So then they started investigating the portal a little bit, and finally they kind of came to a resolution on a few things. And then, it took him a long time before he could actually get to in the summer, before he could actually get healthy enough to throw. And then he was really rusty, as we saw, and Kids Day, he looked bad. You know, people were telling me that, hey, Brendan Sullivan looks better than he does. And then, then he was a little bit up and down. And it's just, there's the lesson, I think, but
I
his,
wonder what the results would have been had Brendan Sullivan been the starter from the jump this season. Because we were talking about that in August. You brought it up. You thought you threw out there speculating. People took it as gospel
yeah,
that
right.
Sullivan could end up being the starter. That's how close it was in August. And then we heard, Cade got settled in a little bit and pulled away a little bit more. But I mean, they stuck with him for 8 starts, Scott.
And it seemed like it should have been over at certain points. Like
Yeah.
the Michigan State first half was a disaster. The second half against Iowa State was horrible. The first half against Troy was bad. It was like a half a game was like terrible for him.
Yeah.
And some of them, the second halves are, a lot of cases, except the Iowa State one was better, but it was never good. You never came away from it, other than maybe Washington, feeling like, yeah, this team seems to be playing at a decent level. I think with Brennan, I think they would have been better. I think they would have won at least one of those games. They obviously didn't win against UCLA, and I think if he would have played the whole game, I don't think they would have won. I mean,
Not the way he was playing.
no, I mean, he had 3 turnovers, and he looked like a guy who was too reckless. And Iowa can't have that. They don't have the capabilities to overcome that right now. But I do think they probably beat Iowa State. That was a 54-yard kick in the
Yeah.
with
It wouldn't have
six.
taken much for that to go the other way.
Yeah, right. If you would have missed it the other way. And then
Or just Iowa gotten into a position to kick a field goal at some other point in that game.
yeah,
So they couldn't have won it with a field goal.
right.
Iowa State.
Yeah, exactly. And then you look at Michigan State. The defense didn't play well, but the offense put them in a bad position. It was what, 15-0 with 5 field goals at halftime. Their defense is not playing well, obviously. And Aiden Childs is showing that he's got some abilities in that game, and same thing with Nick Marsh. But you've got to be, you've got to do something on offense to help your defense too. Mm-hmm. That's the complementary style. And because, last year it never really caught up with them until the end. And this year it caught up with them at Michigan State. So,
well, Michigan State and UCLA were able to do one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Slow Caleb.
Yeah. Right. UCLA has a really good run defense. And
I mean, he ripped off the big one in East Lansing, but other than that, he was stuffed most of the night. And the other teams that tried to do that couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's why Iowa won.
Right. Exactly. They tried, but they failed.
Right.
Those teams succeeded. Iowa State didn't succeed against it. I mean,
Nope.
They allowed like 200 yards against him and, got blown away, on that part of it. But Iowa couldn't capitalize because the quarterback was 5 of 18 in the final 3 quarters.
Yeah.
And Iowa State has some great performers. I saw them on Saturday night too. And, those 2 receivers are legitimate NFL guys. Rocco Becht is a good quarterback, and you can't just go into a game against a team like that and say, we're going to hold them to 19 points or 20 points and, win. You've got to score 20 some yourself. And they didn't, and they lost. And so, I guess if Brendan Sullivan was the quarterback, I think they beat Iowa State. Michigan State is probably closer. I don't know if they win or not, but I don't think, because it's hard to say if he turns the ball over more, like he did against UCLA. I'll say no on the other 2. So, one more win, but it means all 4 trophy games would be in their possession.
Yeah, I think the conclusion we can draw is what we worried about all off season and into August. Iowa just didn't have a difference maker or they didn't have a guy at quarterback in the room. And now they have to find one. And we'll see how it shakes out. They've got this month, and it's not like they have to get something now either. There's other windows. You want to get something now, but if you get somebody now and you figure out in the spring that whoever you get, and you need to add somebody else to the room for whatever reason, backup purposes, this goes all the way to next season. So you're not limited to just, okay, the portal's open on the 9th. We've got to get a quarterback quick. There's time here.
Yeah, there's time. In a perfect world, what they want is for them to get somebody in this interim period, that hits the portal, and let's say Miller Moss, from USC, and all of a sudden he picks Iowa, and you get him here in the spring. He can work with Lester. You can really, get on the same page, go through spring drills, and then, through the summer, and then they're kind of in a good position come training camp. That's the ideal perfect world. But as you said, what if he goes to Louisville because, hey, Jeff Brom throws the ball over the place, and he's had a lot of success too. And so then you go, okay, who's next? You get to your guy, and then you realize, yeah, he's good, but I'm not sure he's really good. And then maybe somebody, and you can't overlook the low level guys. I'll give you an example. Tyson Bagent is the number 2 quarterback of the Chicago Bears. And he was like a 5-year guy at Shepherd University. He was a, undrafted free agent. He came into camp, kicked ass, looked really good. And he's number 2 behind Caleb Williams. And, and you'd watch him, even in like preseason and some of the things he does. And you're like, why can't Iowa get a guy like that? or you look at a Cam Miller from Solon, who's 8 miles up the road, and instead they go get an Alex Padilla or somebody like that. So um, those are the things you've got to really be cognizant of. I think if you're Iowa, that those low levels, would they have been better off, Rob, if they had Cam Miller over any of the quarterbacks they've had last 5 years? Absolutely. He was only 8 miles up the road. They could have said, "Hey, ride your bike to Kinnick, and we'll offer you a scholarship." He would have.
Yeah.
Instead he now starts like 60 some odd game, or he had 38 going into this year. So he has 50 career starts right this very minute. And has like 8,000 yards passing and 2,000 rushing or something like that. How good would he have been in Tim Lester's offense this year? It might have kept Brian
Yeah.
Ferentz's job too, for that matter.
Yeah. I think you go in and again, there's not breaking news or you know, very insightful, but last year they had Cade, they got Sullivan out of the portal and Stratton out of the portal. Those were not upgrades over Cade
Yeah.
or not significant upgrades over Cade. You go in this year, you got to identify guys that are better than what you have and significantly better than what you have and had. That's the only way to fix this thing. You can't just go, this guy might work or that guy
Yeah.
might work. You got to go in and know you're getting a guy. You can't go another year just kind of reshuffling the deck.
The best part for this team right now, Rob, is that they have a guy who played quarterback, who coached
Yeah.
quarterbacks, who's played it and has been a head coach with eyes on calling plays and coaching that position. You think back, I mean, as we all can critique Brian Ferentz not being there, being the OC was a bad move. The worst move of all was moving to the quarterback coach. And you look at some of the people that they picked up in that time frame, and it's just, like James Rezar, no offense to him, but what are you evaluating when you bring in a guy that within a month he's moving to wide receiver? And their approach has been really poor. So I think having a guy in the room that understands not only how to coach the position and how the position plays, but what he is specifically looking for in that role. I think that's going to be really healthy for them when they do go out. And I know that they are now more focused on, certain, on this, and Tim is pretty much watching film 24/7, on different quarterbacks and how they might fit. And they're prepared to pay if, now I don't think 5 million a year. They're not going to pay Bryce Underwood money, to, like Michigan is, but but then they also recognize that the yearly recruiting, high school recruiting, has been really bad at that position too. And it's so much like the NFL draft when you think about it. You've got if you draft somebody, you get 4 or 5 years of them before you have to pay them again. So and that's kind of the same way with, let's say, Jimmy Sullivan. What if he hits next year as a true freshman? He's early enrolling. What if he looks good in spring and all of a sudden, wow, he's our number 2, and then something happens and he plays well, and you get him for 1 or 2 years on kind of that rookie contract, and then you pay him, but you've already got him proven he's already been a part of you. Versus, okay, like now we don't have anybody that we feel like go out and start and win championships in the Big Ten. So now you got to go out and pay. And the guys that they picked up, as you mentioned, in the portal, Deacon Hill, that was a last place, or that was a hope, just somebody who can hand off, because Cade couldn't hand off in camp, so, or spring football that year. They had nobody to do that. So they had him and Joey Labus, who for whatever reason fell completely out of favor with Brian. And I know he apparently wasn't real mature or something like that. It was kind of what was said, but and then this year, Brendan Sullivan was just kind of seen as a guy, give him an opportunity. It's just, there are two paths. They're going to obviously have to look for somebody who's, established probably, but they also don't want to overlook an incredibly talented guy that got passed up at some point. You look at Illinois' situation with Luke Altmaier, who is really good this year. Probably number 4 in the Big Ten in my eyes as far as quarterbacks this year. But he was at Ole Miss. They went out and got Jackson Dart, to be the quarterback from USC. He got passed up. He left. He went to Illinois. Now he's a really quality starter. And so if you get some of those guys who are, somebody who's number 2 at an SEC school that was a 4-star that is looking for an opportunity to play and is really good, and you feel like he fits, don't be shy about pulling the trigger there. Just, sometimes being productive at one school doesn't mean this guy sucks because he's not played very much at this other school.
Yeah, opportunity, that's super important. A lot of guys haven't gotten an opportunity. You want to find the guy who deserves the opportunity and can excel with it. And we'll see what Iowa does. I have a feeling this is going to be the hot topic of the next few weeks. So yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about it a lot more. Probably should take a break here. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you to Systems Unlimited for the support of the podcast and the great work it's doing in our community. Let's hear from a few more sponsors. Scott and I will be back on the other side. Hang tight. And we're back. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us, like Scott, switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Hardcore Hawk fans like Scott have to have a Kinnick Scoreboard Entertainment Center. Contact Fanatics Furniture at 319-750-0005 or knick3615 at gmail.com. Scoreboard Entertainment Centers. Be hardcore. 319-750-0005 or knick3615 at gmail.com. Black Angel Restaurant, good time to get in a nice toasty restaurant. It's cold as hell in Iowa City. Well, I guess hell isn't cold, but it's really cold in Iowa City. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City, Perez Brothers, formerly of El Banditos, Perez Brother Tacos. Check out Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. You will not be disappointed. Nice and toasty in there. Get yourself out of the cold. Scott, I got a programming announcement. Tonight, 7:30 ESPN or NBC, 7:30 Central Time, NBC. Frosty the Snowman airs. I know you'll be locked in.
Frosty's tonight?
Yep. Happy birthday!
We can get in the philosophy of that cartoon if we want, because my daughter and I have spoken at lengths about it and how stupid it is. When this, you think about this little girl named Karen is chasing around a hat and a snowman and goes to the North Pole after school, and then there's this
on
old
a train.
On a train by herself, and there's an old magician following her. I mean, how horrific is that? That's something that couldn't be made today. But but then I also look at it and I'm like, the dude was just trying to get his hat back.
Yeah.
It's unfair, but I don't know. Holiday cartoons, I love them all. I'm a sucker for them, and I try not to view them with that kind of 2024 skepticism. And Rudolph,
they're not based in reality. If you start there, you'll be good.
I know. I mean, like Rudolph, Santa's an asshole,
Yeah.
Santa's an asshole in that. And so is the dad, it's like, dude, what the fuck? I mean, sorry, I shouldn't say that.
And the other reindeer for that matter.
Right. You talk about bullying. God, that's terrible. And my favorite's Charlie Brown Christmas. I'll try to watch that every year.
No
But yeah,
doubt.
it's so Frosty's tonight, huh? Well,
Year Without a Santa Claus is a favorite too, with the
yeah,
Heat Miser and
yeah,
that's a good one.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
we're getting into that time of year for the holiday special. So, if you guys didn't know, check it out tonight, 7:30 NBC, 7:30 Central Time, NBC. Frosty the Snowman. Happy birthday. All right, Scott. um, let's talk a little bit about signing day yesterday. It's almost like signing day isn't what it used to be. First of all, it's 2 months earlier than it used to be
Yeah.
now. There still is a February signing day, but the early signing period moved up again, which is good. I like it. You get it out of the way before the bowl prep starts. So good. I like that move. Iowa signed 15 guys, two preferred walk-ons added as well. Just an explanation for people. Chad's got a good story on this too on Hawk Central, just on kind of the future of the walk on. And we've talked about this on this podcast
Yeah.
when different rules have come down, the 105 limit. It's really going to change things, Scott. And Iowa's got to, what are they at 128? They got to get down to 105. Really
Mhm.
going to take some management now going into next season. Of course, the House settlement isn't done yet. And I retweeted a story from Front Office Sports this morning about several states, maybe up to 12, including California and New York, that have their own state laws in relation to NIL. So if the NCAA in the House tries to impose a limit on what student athletes can make beyond what they'll get from the universities in this new setup, there could be court cases here, Scott. In fact, there probably will be.
It's necessary too, Rob.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
you hate to say, because court sucks,
Yeah.
and it's like everything's going to court and stuff. But there needs to be establishments made here. There needs to be precedents. So when it changes, then there are reasons why, not just that it can be changed. And I think it'll be healthy, because if they do go to court, just like getting NIL in the first place, that established that NIL is important, and it's been unfair for decades that players haven't been allowed to profit off their name, image, and likeness. Now that they can, it's like, well, what is considered fair and what is considered unfair? I mean, I think the first one that's going to happen is getting female athletes and male athletes. Should the revenue dispersal be based on marketability, which means football, in most cases men's basketball, will receive not only the majority but most of that money provided by the athletics department, or should it be based on like scholarships allocated by enrollment numbers, based on 54% are women, that's where the scholarships go. The argument is you're providing that opportunity, but you're not necessarily, that's where it ends, that you don't need to, but that's going to be argued, I'm sure, at court. And just like with this. And so collectives aren't going to die, but it gets rid of most of the need for the main parts, where everybody's, whether it's walk-ons or the other sports where they're being able to go volunteer in a women's shelter or at an animal shelter or whatever, that's going to be paid through the school now. You don't have to raise money for that. The rest of it, but there's going to be a need for getting that quarterback, or getting that left tackle, from Alabama for 6 weeks, or
The hard thing is trying to gauge what each person's value is
Mhm.
in NIL. Because that when I read the story this morning, the argument is the House NCAA settlement limits what NIL can be given beyond what the universities provide the students in that deal. Um, how do you know? I mean, just like you know, the kid from Michigan, Underwood, like you said,
Yeah.
you know, uh, can you legally restrict what a university can pay through its NIL? How do you know what the market is? You can't say that you can't go over this amount of money. And if you leave it open ended, then you just have the Wild West again when we come to the name guys the name athletes that are looking for the big paydays and probably deserve it if the market is saying they do.
It's true, yeah. And well, I think that's where it's all going to be. It's kind of the same deal in life.
Yeah.
How much am I worth? How much are you worth to our employers? How much is somebody at University of Iowa, working in health systems worth? Or computer tech, whatever. And it's
Teachers.
teachers. I mean, it's up to what the market says you're worth, and that's going to be part of it. And now, how I think the next wave is how, and this is going to be a really interesting question is how much can they be paid um, during from the school and then on the outside, because in some cases it's you basically sell your NIL rights to the university and they compensate you for them, but then you don't have an opportunity to do it on the side. So that's still very blurry. And I don't know which way it's going to go yet. And that's going to be something that's determined probably by the final and that initial settlement when it's finalized, I think in April. By the way, James Rezard just hit the portal. So, the quarter.
I guess he didn't want to play wide receiver.
Yeah.
Or at least not wide receiver here.
Yeah, right.
Again, though, Scott, that's just another log on this fire of disaster at quarterback. I mean, this is a kid you brought in this class, in the 24 class, and he's already gone.
This is the identification at the front end. What are you looking at? Because he said yes. I mean, that's like going out and you see an orange tree and you're in sunny Florida and you just grab the first orange that is in front of you, and you don't know that the other side may not be exactly what you're looking for. Let's say I'm not going to compare somebody to a rotten orange, but in this case, he came up from Jacksonville, Florida. He said yes right after the Iowa State debacle, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your quarterback. That's it. Well, what? Carson May came up and had a camp in a situation and had really no offers. I mean, maybe Memphis or somebody was in there involved. You offer him and he's your guy. And it's just like, it's not the same as going out and getting a guard. I mean,
yeah.
You've got this, no offense to guards, but because you have a great guard isn't going to win you a championship. It may help you get there, but and James Rezar, everybody knew that he was, I mean, by all accounts, he was a really nice guy. I met him once. I thought he was great.
I did a podcast with him. Really super nice kid. I wish him the best.
Absolutely.
I just don't think this was probably the best spot for him right from the jump.
And you just wonder, what are you looking at here? Why did you evaluate him as your potential quarterback? Because you've got to, when you're going to the freshman guys, you've got to look at every single one of them as this guy could be a 3-year starter for us.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say, well, maybe not. The only way you don't say that is if you're like Nebraska and you just had a freshman 5-star. But even then you got to be careful because, when you have a 5-star at a place like that or an Iowa even, then they may want to have wandering eyes, so you got to be careful. But so you still have to evaluate those guys in that manner. So I think why it made no sense. And that's why you need a quarterback in that chair, coaching.
Yeah, I just wonder, Marco, Jackson Stratton, even Brendan Sullivan. I mean, they're not guaranteed to be here next year either. So still moving parts there.
Yeah. Right. I mean, Marco has played only a little bit. It's not really sad and unfortunate. He broke his thumb when he did.
Yeah,
I mean,
that would have been his bad luck.
Yeah. That would have been his opportunity. Mm-hmm. He would have played before Jackson Stratton. And, he's a really good runner, kind of like,
Brendan Sullivan.
Yeah, Brendan Sullivan. And, and it's hard to say what Brendan Sullivan was. He's a Northwestern graduate. He played there this year. He was, by all accounts, well liked. I think Iowa fans respected him a lot and like him a lot. But I also don't think that you can't worry too much about feelings when you're starting. This is business now. They're getting paid now, and if your opportunity is to go out and, Miller Moss, or let's say Devin Brown hits the market from Ohio State, you got to go get your player. You've got to go get your winning quarterback. And if Brendan says, I want an opportunity to play, wish him good luck. Hope for the
Because I
best.
think that's why he left Northwestern. He
It
wasn't
sounded
guaranteed the spot.
he wasn't guaranteed a shot at the spot.
Yeah. So, I mean, these guys all have to make decisions. He'll have to evaluate, okay, this is who Iowa got out of the portal. What are my chances? What are the coaches telling me in terms of this being a competition?
Yeah.
Or is the guy they bring in, they have to pay a bunch of money, automatically going to get the nod because of the investment? So it's such a different game now with so many different factors.
Yeah, because when Cade came in, everybody knew he was a starter. He was
Yep.
named the starter before anything because they were paying him a lot of money. He had the pedigree. It made sense to do that too. You don't
And they
just
didn't
bring,
have any killer on
yeah,
the current roster.
right. Padilla hit the market. Petrus was hurt,
Yep.
And so it would have been Marco coming in. That's why Joey Labus was there, but that's why they only had Labus in that spring. So that's why they brought in Deacon Hill just to hand the ball
Yeah.
off, and then Deacon ended up being a little, in their eyes, a little bit better than Joey and not mine, but theirs. And I'm not saying that they might have been better off with Joey Labus than Cade too, for that matter. But so that's going forward. What they're going to have to do is evaluate that, and again, it depends on what you're looking for, who's out there, and if you've got a guy that doesn't have a lot of experience but a lot of talent, you feel like can be a part of your team, then you have to consider, like what's his name, Lincoln Kienholz from Ohio State's a good example. I think that's his name. He's the sophomore from South Dakota, and
Yep.
he's at Ohio State. He's not going to play there. He's third string at best, but probably more like fourth string right now. But he is very talented. If that's the kind of guy you evaluate and say, I think he can come in and play a lot, is he the type of guy that you go, well, I don't know that day one he'll be ready to be a great quarterback. So maybe we convince Brendan Sullivan, maybe give him a little more money, and you say, look, we think he's our guy, but we like you too. We think we're going to have special packages for you. You're going to have the opportunity to start. If you win the starting role, you will. He is going to play though. And because they did do some half stepping at quarterback this year, which was unusual for Iowa. That never happened in the past.
Yep.
Not since Brad Banks and Kyle McCann did they do what they do this year. So that's something that I think that could work and placate. Because I don't think Brendan Salt. I think if he's self-aware, he understands he's not going to the NFL, but this is an opportunity to play ball.
Yeah,
And
you also have the factor of, do we get a guy that we can have for multiple years, or do we get a guy for 1 year and we're in this position again next year if Jimmy Sullivan or Marco or somebody hasn't developed, then we got to go in the portal again. So it's different. It's a different day and age, and there's strategy involved, and sometimes there's luck. And
yeah,
Iowa had bad luck with Cade.
yeah, yeah, no question. It's yeah, and you're right. I mean, if you get a guy who has 1 year left, and you are convinced he is your starter, then you got to be transparent with Brendan Sullivan, because that's the way he'll approach it. It's like, well, we're bringing in Miller. I don't know if he's got one. I think he does only have 1 year. Miller Moss or Devin Brown or somebody like that, and they're going to be our starter. You tell him that on the front end, and then he can decide, well, I really like being at Iowa, and
And I think I could beat this guy out.
yeah, exactly. I could beat this guy out. You know, Iowa could still say, look, we really liked some of the things you did, and we think there's an opportunity for you to play
Mm-hmm.
and be a part of this team and do those types of things. Then I think you continue to go down that path. But I also think you're aware, you allow him to make that decision too. Be fair to him. And by all accounts, Iowa has not been unfair to anybody when it comes to that, and they aren't going to be. They want to be transparent. Kirk said that. I talked to him last week about it, or asked the question that, and because all the walk-ons, like you were saying, with the walk-ons, you're going to have to be transparent with them. They're all going to be able to get a chance to play through spring, but they're going to have to make cuts, otherwise. And that's, the best thing you can do is kind of like with the NFL at that point is be upfront with them, tell them the position that, right now, you're on the team, but I don't know that you're going to make it. And then it's up to the player saying, hey, I'm going to work my ass off in the weight room and I'm going to go out in the spring and kick ass. And if it doesn't work out, and they cut me, well, I gave it my best shot. Or it's, yeah, maybe I need to transfer now and get into another system, So there's really, as long as you're fair to these guys and upfront and honest and transparent, there's nothing wrong that anybody's doing.
Roster management, it never stops, really. The recruiting never stops. Acquisition and attrition doesn't stop. So we'll be on it as we go. We keep coming back to the quarterback discussion, which I think lets you guys know how important this is. I mean, we go to different topics and we end up circling back to the quarterback position. You've watched the film, I assume. I've watched film. I like Jimmy Sullivan. I think he's got a chance. He doesn't look like a guy that's going to come in and play right away, but you never know. Guys come in sometimes, and he'll come in January and have a chance to go through the spring. But he's obviously a big part of the recruiting class they signed yesterday. Scott, Yosei Epinesa, probably the headliner of the class, the most highly ranked. He got a nice payday too, I heard.
Yeah.
But I like this class. I think they address needs. Terrence Smith intrigues the heck out of me. The receiver from West Aurora, Illinois High School. I think he's got a really high ceiling. He's raw still, but I think he can get there with some development. And I like this class. And I know we say this every year, but there are some really intriguing pieces in this class. Tight end. I think Thomas Meyer committed so early, I think people forgot about him a little bit. He's a really talented guy, Scott. He was a really good defensive end this year, too, at Clear Lake. So I'm taking up a lot of the guys. I'll let you talk about some guys.
No, I'm there with you on this. And I think that's really I and getting Olante Dean, which things kind of were back and forth all through the night, which, one of the things Tyler said was he was at the basketball game Tuesday night. And but missed the shot because he was looking at his phone because he got word about Olante Dean and Louisville being a real possibility at that stage. And so he was,
For those that don't know, he's a defensive back from Seffner, Florida, Armwood. If you're really old school, you remember that Antoine Allen was from that high school.
Wasn't there another one? I mean,
another defensive back they got out
Dane,
of there.
was it?
Nah, I can't remember the kid's name. If you guys remember who the kid was, throw it in the chat on YouTube. I'll remember after we're done with the podcast.
Yeah, now I'm going to have to go through my notes here because I kept all these guys. But I guess the thing that I think is going to get overlooked and it shouldn't. Oh, Rashad Godfrey.
There we go.
Yeah,
there was another guy too from like 15 years ago too.
Yeah,
whatever.
But I think
that's Phil's area, the Tampa.
Right.
He loves getting defensive backs from there in Detroit.
Yeah.
Those are his spots.
He's never going to leave Detroit. I was told that yesterday. But to me, the steals, the ones that we're not talking about, are the two linebackers from the Chicagoland. They are ass kickers. I mean, they've got 5 elite guys who are going to be freshmen or redshirt freshmen at that position.
And they're going to need them.
Yeah, because next year, it's going to be a fascinating
linebacker is a very fascinating position for next year. That thing is open for business.
And both of them are early enrollment. And Carson Cooney and Burt Goucher.
None of the 3 guys last year enrolled early, right? The in-state guys, they all played spring sports and stuff,
right.
I think.
Yeah. Preston Reese and Cam Buffington and Derek Weiskopf. So, that is going to be a really intriguing battle. And then you bring in the guys who are holdovers, because I mean, replacing Jay and Nick, they are really good long-term players. You can't just walk in.
Tyler Fisher was a good player too. I know that Nick and Jay deserve the headlines, but Kyler was an important piece this year and last year.
Yeah, he played a lot better. I think after the Ohio State game, I
Yeah.
saw him play much better. But then, but replacing those three, and then you've got Jaden Harrell, who I think will start at middle linebacker. He's going to get all the trains running on time. Carson Shire has been injured a lot, and but he's talented. I wonder, can he hold on to that? And Jackson Rexroth, who's been a really trusty, walk on, but plays on
Yep.
all the special teams, and we'll see there. But then after that, you've got those five guys all battling. And again, these guys are all going to be there for the spring, for the workouts and stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of breaks down. I think they're not that they want to go back to 4-3, but the talent kind of adds up there. So, and when I did ask Tyler about that yesterday, I haven't written all that stuff yet, but it's like, well, it might end up being like a Jay Higgins situation where one or two of them kind of gets held back a little bit, and then and then you have them later in their career, but of course, how patient will they be, but the other side is the three that are currently on the team are that are freshmen are all from within 50 miles of Iowa City, and then the other two are from the Chicagoland area, which is only one Sycamore actually, so
Yeah.
it's not even that far. It's DeKalb, so they're not from far away. So, but
They've had
Carson,
success with the Sycamore linebackers before.
yeah, they're both still in the
They were
NFL.
brothers.
They both have started games this year in the
Yeah.
NFL.
Yep.
Mostly they're special teams guys, but the way the Lions injuries have crept up on them, that Ben Neiman's had a really important role.
He
But
was headed to Northern Illinois.
yeah,
Play with
right.
his dad. He was probably
Yep.
going to play receiver at
Mhm.
Northern Illinois.
Crazy. But those two really stand out for me. Joey Van Wetzinga, I had the pleasure, in some ways, you could say, of playing against his father. When he was at PV, and if his dad, he's taller than his dad, and he's heavier than his dad, but his dad was like 5'11", maybe 6 foot, and a good 230-ish. Nasty wrestler, physical football player, one of the best players in the state for his last couple of years as a linebacker, fullback. If he was probably a little bit taller, a little bit faster, he'd have been playing on the Big Ten, no question in my mind. So Joey's got that same kind of disposition. And in fact, Tyler Barnes had said that he's more nasty. He's like Linderbaum, except Linderbaum's got a little bit more of a colorful personality. That Joey's just like, man, you really want to kill people, don't you? So,
Yeah, I did a podcast with him, and I've seen him play the last 3 years, so in person, and he's continued to get better. I think he could play defensive line at the next level too, but I think he could be a kick-ass center or guard, and I think that's the right place to start him. And
yeah,
yeah, he's one of those guys that just loves football,
yeah.
and he'll get the most out of his ability, and would not be surprised to see him do really well when he gets here.
And then the one that also gets overlooked that may be as important as anybody is Lucas Algier. Getting a true left tackle is always critical. St. Louis guy, hey, they're still in these markets in the Midwest. They're competing against teams from other leagues, and yet they're going in there getting their guy. And he's an early enrollee too. Based on what we're looking ahead to the offensive line next year, Dunker will probably flip over to left tackle. You've still got Bo Stevens, and Logan Jones is 50-50. He might come back. So which would be a huge lift for this team, because he was as graded as highly as any center in the country. He was first team all Big Ten, and rightly so. He played really, really well this year. So if you look at it and then you got Cade Pieper, who was kind of your backup center and backup guard, and played a lot of tight end on some of those, wham blocks and stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, that you feel pretty good about 4 spots. Right tackle then would be the other one where you're a little bit, well, what do we do? And Trevor Lauk they like, somebody like that. And this is where the portal versus development question comes in for Iowa is, do you stick with the guys you have and think that, okay, we can see a path for Trevor Lauk, for instance, to be the right tackle to start next year. We just got to give him the time and the snaps to do it in the offseason. Or do you think he's still probably a year away? We need to have somebody step in now. And that's going to be the case at all these positions, Rob. And I think defensive line, I think you do need somebody. And Ethan Hurkett's in the same position where he can come back for one more year. I kind of think he does. Whereas I think Logan might be a little more 50-50.
He's got a harder choice, I think, Logan, based on
Yeah.
the way he's risen in NFL draft minds.
Yeah. Yeah. So his are going to be more in the line of what do the NFL scouts say? You know, what do the NFL scouts tell Logan? It is, and legitimately, not the agents. Yeah. And Logan's not a guy that's going to take. Some people, unfortunately, listen too much to agents. You can't do that. You got to evaluate for yourself. And I think he's got to figure out, am I legitimately going to be a top 4 round center? If you can be that, I think you have to kind of.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're going to be 5th to 7th round, how does the money play out? And that's, Iowa could probably come up with a pretty good offer for him. And that would be a godsend. That'd be like getting a 5-star because you're getting maybe the best center in the country to come back. And as we said, if then you start to look at the pieces on offense, and if you say Logan Jones says yes, you've got Bo Stevens, you've got Jennings Dunker, who I think was the best offensive lineman in the Big Ten this year. Then Cade Pieper, who they like enough to think that he's going to be there, and then right tackle, again, development versus portal. That's up to George Barnett, and that's up to them. I'm not going to make that. Addison Ostrenga, very good at tight end. I don't think they need to worry about that. Receiver, there's a lot of youth but is it good enough?
If you can get a guy, man, you got to get a guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you can get a guy,
yeah.
they don't have a guy. I love Jacob Gill. I think he was you can make a case he's their best portal addition.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
There are other candidates, but I mean, he was a revelation this year. But you just don't know. Again, it's kind of like that right tackle, Scott, where you're like, all right, where are we at? Where's Dayton Howard? Where's Jarrett Bowie? And are those the guys we can count on next year? Like Trevor Lauk? Are those three guys ready? Or do we have to address that in the portal to get a stopgap at the very least?
Right. And you look at receiver, you got Reese Vandersee, who's been hurt. He comes back. You've got Seth Anderson back for another year, or at least as right now it is. Jacob Gill, who I think you count on. He's one of your guys. I think you would hate to budge him out because I think he's done it the right way. And then you look at other receivers, and that's going to be a big question for them. Let's see here. I got these kind of listed. Jarrett Bowie, Dayton Howard, do they fit in there? Weegan, I think, still have an opportunity, but KJ Parker you brought in, he hasn't really done much, but he's only a freshman. And then Alex Moda, who seems to be hurt most of the time, so where do they fit in versus what can you do? Terrence Smith, he's not coming in to play right away. It's more of a project, but do you feel like you've got 4 or 5 guys that fit what you want with Vandersee, with Bowie, with Howard, with Gill, Seth Anderson, whatever? Or do you feel like, we still need to go out and get at least one more guy? And then what kind of guy do you get? There's not going to be is quarterback maybe a challenge. Unless the quarterback has a relationship with a receiver, you're not getting a receiver.
Come join the 131st ranked passing offense.
Your best bet in that situation, Rob, is you hope that somebody like a Charlie Jones or maybe a South Dakota wide receiver, that just wants an opportunity at the next level. But even then, that's no guarantee that they're better than what you have. So I mean, for me, priority is quarterback 1, 2, and 3, and then defensive line after that, and then see what else.
Inside or outside on the D line?
Both.
All right.
I'd get two. I'd at least get a tackle and I'd get an end, that you think have a chance to start. Because now if Ethan Hurkett comes back, you feel a lot better at defensive end, although you still need to get better there. They weren't real great there this year. I think Max Llewellyn is your future. I think he's a starter. I think Brian Allen, who's hurt and going to have surgery and be out for a long time, I think he's got a chance to be a really good player for this team, long term. And if Hurkitt's there, I feel like you got three, but you still need kind of a pass rusher. And if Hurkitt comes back, then you can start to say, well, what about a Kenny Merriweather? What about a Joseph Anderson? Any of those guys, can they make that jump and be a valuable contributor? But I think there's no question you need somebody in the interior. And this is where a guy like Terrio Thompson was really kind of short-sighted, that, this would have been his opportunity. It would have been his opportunity to play a lot this year, but it would have been his opportunity to probably start next year, provided you still keep Aaron Graves and the NFL doesn't poach him, which I don't think they will. I think he needs another year.
And then, Pittman was kind of hot and cold this year, but maybe he gets that consistency with another spring and everything. So it depends on how Kelvin evaluates him and says, yeah, it's just, this is he's going through the process, but next year he should be ready to be solid.
Right. But, they've been at their best when they've had 8 guys.
Yeah.
That they can march out there, starting or rotational, doesn't matter. One, and right now we're looking at 2 in the interior, and Graves is an automatic starter, no question. But what about but Pittman? Yeah, he's been good at times, but is he capable of? I look at him as kind of like Faith Akakity was.
Yeah,
good, solid, but you do need, and they're not going to find Y.A. Black in the portal, because he's probably going to go A to the NFL or B, more than you want to pay. But you might, if you could find somebody like the Jack Heflin,
yeah,
that's what you're looking for. And, or somebody that's maybe been behind, let's say somebody who's like third team at Ohio State or Alabama or something like that, that's got the opportunity, doesn't have had a chance to play yet, that's really talented. I think that's another position. But Iowa always skews towards the smaller schools that looking to take that step up because they have that work ethic that they like.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, we had planned to talk about some basketball, but we'll kick that can down the road for another week here, because we wanted to do an hour. We're already at an hour and 15, so we're going to call it a week. Basketball-wise, the men are at Michigan on Saturday. The women are in Brooklyn to play Tennessee. And tomorrow night, Friday, December the 6th, the Iowa wrestling team will be in Missouri to wrestle Princeton and Army. So those are your weekend local Iowa events that are going on. So check that out. And then obviously you have a lot of college football to check out as well. Iowa State, I know all the Iowa fans will be rooting for the Cyclones to win that game Saturday or not.
Yeah.
Think about it though. If the Cyclones go to the playoffs, you are just a whisker from beating a playoff team.
Yeah.
That's one way to look at it.
That's one way. And I think a few people may look at it that way, but most will not.
No.
I imagine you've got the categories of Iowa fans with this going. There's probably half of them that are like, good for them. I'm not going to root against them.
Don't you think most Iowa fans have some connection to an Iowa State fan? At least, especially in state.
Yeah.
Relative, friend, somebody you can feel good for.
Yeah. A neighbor, whatever. Yeah. That's, somebody you work with, of course. And, and there are, I would say a third to a half of the people who would never root for Iowa State if they were playing, I don't know, the Russians and the Cold War, and then there are some others, I think of, like my in-laws, they paid for 3 kids to go to Iowa State, 2 to go to Iowa, another to go to UNI. So they're kind of, they're
invested. That's literally be invested in the in-state schools.
Exactly. So I give them a pass, when especially my mother-in-law who, chooses to, root for everybody, go ahead,
let's have fun. Everybody have fun. Orange slices for everybody.
Yeah. Guacamole. Here we are, homemade guacamole. But then I think of so I'm sure people could be kind of happy about it, be a little jealous about it if they win. Also have some Schadenfreude if they lose, like haha, suckers. I'm sure there's gonna be some of that too. So I don't know, Rob. But I think that's interesting. Last week we were both 6-4 on our picks.
We don't have picks this week, right? I didn't leave them out. We
Well,
can do, you want to do bowl picks?
we can do Penn State, Oregon if you want.
I'll take Oregon. What's the
Okay,
point spread?
-3.5.
Yeah, I'll take Oregon.
All right, you take Oregon. I'm going to take Penn State.
Okay. What,
So
what was last week? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
we were both 6-4.
Okay, not bad.
Yeah. So, and at this point in the season, you're up 8. That's pretty good. And I'm 73-55. So,
Nice.
yeah. So we're
Making
both.
people money.
Yeah, I know. I think anytime when you're doing picks based on the spread, and if you're over 500, you're in good shape. And last week we
had different picks last week, didn't we? On a few.
We missed on 2. One was you took Michigan State -2 and Rutgers won.
That was ridiculous.
I took Rutgers, and then I took Notre Dame -7.5, and they won by 7. So the hook
Let that be a lesson to you.
Damn it. The hook got me. The hook won it for you. But anyway, no, it's all been good. And I think we've had a productive year on that front.
And we'll do our bowl picks once they come out on Sunday. Maybe we'll do that next week or at least before they kick off. So look forward to that. And we will talk about basketball and some wrestling moving forward here. But football is just, it's the front porch. And there was a lot going on in football this week, from the signing day to Cade to the Nebraska game being over, other, plenty of going on in football that we had to address. So that's why we did. But we appreciate everybody for listening. Thank you so much to our sponsors for helping us bring you these podcasts. Have a good rest of your week and weekend. And Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. Say goodbye, Scott.